Hey friends, I'm here live for podcast number 2 of the Conscious Men's Collective with Shane Osharua Alexander. It's Trevor Spring here. So today it's April 14th. We're cutting the second podcast of the series from Conscious Men's Collective. We're here today to talk about many things, but really through the really foundational lens of self-sabotage and why it's relevant to look at self-sabotage and how it pervades through all of our relations and how we sabotage there and how we're sabotaging ourselves on a global planetary level, and how this process really comes from the way that we individually own our connection to the feminine principle within us, and how we work with that externally in the world, and then what we ultimately create as a society. So we're here to really break this down and flesh it out and make these things more commonplace, these conversations more commonplace and more easily understandable. So Shane, do you want to share a bit about that?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction.
You're welcome.
Yes, so as Trevor and I get together to record these podcasts, we realize that there's so many things we want to talk about, and yet we're going to have to take a few podcasts just to keep introducing ourselves and introducing what it is and why it is that we're here to speak at all, why we bother to come together to share these podcasts. And today's theme is self-sabotage, and we're going to be looking at patterns of self-destructive behaviors, most specifically within men here on the planet, and owning it, not speaking to other men, but to myself and Trevor, to us, and seeing where these patterns of self-destruction are inside of all of us, and how we can start to notice them in our daily life, in our interactions with our closest relationships, and how we can start to adjust them, start to heal them, and also start to proactively create a different reality from our closest family, friends, inner circle outward. How we can start to see how we work with these patterns that are what Trevor and I are specifically to speak about today is patterns of fragmentation and separation that are visible in our world today, and how we start those patterns of separation and fragmentation ourselves and start to bring it into the awareness of how we are helping to create this reality, and how when we can shift it in our personal world, we can start to bring a more holistic, inclusive environment to our own being and to our own relationships, and create that as a pattern to share out with our community in our bigger world. Seeing how the self-sabotage at home works into self-sabotage as a planet, and into corporate or government structures that are self-sabotaging. And there's a beginning of an overview, and let's leave that back with you, Trevor, if there's something you want to add in or help shape it in that direction.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and like you said, this is complex material to take on and to transmit to other people whose minds are not in the same place as us. So how do we get this across in a way that's understandable? And one of the ways that I was thinking today of us working with this is just like we would in Circle, if this was a question, I want to take this on from a place of if I recognize this fragmentation in myself, and that it's from a level of disconnect with parts of my true self, which I feel is parts of the feminine aspects of myself that I've learned to not honor and not accept and disown. And if I take these concepts and bring the fragmented bits back into wholeness, well, what does that look like for me? Because this is ultimately about us taking responsibility for these things that we're talking about on a personal level. And we can't share and we can't assist others in seeing it. And we can't say, hey, you go out and take responsibility for this if we're not doing the same thing for ourselves. So I think it's really powerful, and that I'd just like to take responsibility in my imperfection as a being, as a person, that I'm not a perfect man, and the ways that this concept shows up for me is in allowing myself to be pulled into these fragmented ways that I've learned to cope with being alive on this planet through a lifetime of conditioning, and to relate to others in a fragmented way, to show up in a hyper masculine way, to get to allow myself to engage in things that don't serve me in my professional expression, my personal relationships, and then ultimately my vision for what I'm creating of my life. And when I'm creating this like fragmented sense of self, this like only masculine, where I'm only working with like accomplishment, sense of mastery and excellence and knowing the way at all times, and this linear thought progression and this linear identity, not recognizing emotions and the guiding force that they are, and not using my intuition, and not taking care of myself on the more subtle levels, that I'm creating every day, that I'm living more in that vicious cycle of fragmentation and hyper masculinization, and not connected to the balanced sides of myself, which is like more feminine and more masculine. When I'm disconnected from those parts of myself, then what I create is more fragmentation. My relationships aren't as connected. The way that I practice my craft and grow my business and reach out to people is not connected. And the way that I perceive myself moving through this is not connected. And I think we've all learned for that to be normalized to a degree. So part of the process of us, I think, taking on these calls and these podcasts, of moving towards them, is like pulling ourselves in to reflect with one another and look each other in the eye and say, okay, let's keep showing up for this, because I think that we can hold each other to this more integrated whole expression of how we live our lives. And that's what we're here to talk about. And the more we talk about it with each other, not just think about it in our minds, the more we strengthen this concept and the framework and our ability to really work with it in a real way, in this integrated way, not just sort of in our own secret little mind world where we could be delusional and, not really aware in the way that we are as a pair, you and I, and then as anyone else who's listening to this. So yeah, that's really how I'd like to start, is by taking responsibility and stating my intention for how I'd like to move forward with this concept in my heart.
Yeah, thank you, Trevor.
Yeah.
And even before we started recording today, we were speaking, and there's something important about us. Like, we could be on our own doing our own podcast, but yet we feel it's really important to, not only is our friendship really powerful and strengthening to me, to have another brother that can hold these thoughts and speak with them with me, hold space to hear them and reflect them back to me in his life, how we can share a common vision about this and a common desire to see it spread. In a way, it's us giving voice to something that doesn't have a voice right now, both within ourselves and collectively on the planet. And so rather than one of us just rants in front of a camera by ourselves, we feel it's even more beautiful and powerful if we can be having a conversation together and showing this shared vision, to where, like, hey, if you're having a hard time understanding what we're saying, that as Trevor and I pass it back and forth, maybe it'll become more, you can see it spoken from two different points of view, and we can start to see make a living presentation of what it looks like for 2 minutes to talk about these things, because that is, again, something we do not see in our world too often. And there's aspects of myself that I feel don't have a voice in the world, and I'm trying to make a place to speak it and to create the reality that I believe in, and to speak my truth, and not to just keep quiet and wonder kind of a place of ignoring it or a pain by not seeing it ever have a place where it's living outside in the world today. And so I wanted to speak a little bit about abuse on the planet, abuse coming from men, how we abuse each other as men, how we abuse women, how we could abuse children, or how we can even abuse the planet
And ourselves.
and ourselves. And maybe the easiest way to gently step into this topic, I could say that even the lightest level of abuse could come in the form of ignoring or neglect. And we all know that if we are trying to speak our truth or to say something, we are constantly ignored or neglected, it's very painful. If this goes on for days or weeks or months or years, it gets to a point where there's no longer an effort to communicate anymore if we're constantly neglected or not heard. And this creates the fragmentation that we're here to talk about today. And so when important voices are speaking up and they're not being heard, they're not being acknowledged, we're creating fragmentation with parts of ourself, parts of our whole self that we need to be integrating and working with for healthy creation on the planet. And if there's an aspect of Trevor that he needs to speak up and say that, then in order to be a friend of Trevor, I need to have space to hear that. And if I can only engage with Trevor if he only speaks to me on one level, on one topic, but anything else, I don't want to hear it, well, then I'm creating a very narrow connection with Trevor and not really being inclusive of everything that Trevor could bring to me. And there's really no way for me to even know that other than to be open and supportive of whatever it is Trevor brings forward. This is a lead-in.
Yeah.
Feel free to jump in on this, but the reason I'm bringing this up, I'll take it more specifically. When women in our lives speak to us and we say, hey, that's not logical, or that's not a masculine way of thinking, and so therefore it must be like unimportant. It's not, that's sweet that you think like that, and I don't, and so I don't need to take that into consideration. And I'll go check in with my guy friends to have them confirm with me that, like, yeah, I'm thinking logical, and that's all that needs to be spoken about today, because we're gonna compete, we're going to win, we're going to make money, we're going to take over the world, we're going to do whatever. But whatever my girlfriend or my partner was saying, that was probably going to get in the way of me doing what I was about to do.
Right. That would make me have to actually self-assess and maybe change my plans. And that's not convenient at all.
It might change the whole direction of my global domination plan that I had put out when I woke up this morning. But yeah. So this is what we want to speak to today, is how by ignoring and not hearing certain aspects of ourselves, not ignoring and not hearing aspects of our partners, not being inclusive of their input, that we are in effect damaging ourselves. We're cutting off aspects of ourselves, communication with aspects of ourselves, and we're beginning to create in a very lopsided, overly masculinized version that's building towers that are collapsing on our planet. And Trevor and I both have the clear vision that a more inclusive, accepting mentality of receiving the feminine wisdom that looks very different than the masculine wisdom. Yet when we bring them both together, they can create beautifully together. And to be holding that vision of what it would look like is if we not only have women on the council of any big decisions happening on the planet, but not just women, but even our partners, and to be doing things more together as men and women, as like brothers and sisters, and that not put masculine, logical type thinking on a higher plane than feminine wisdom, and to realize that they are two aspects of a whole that need to come together for healthy creation.
Yeah.
Pause there on that topic.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. And I love, this is just proof the way that we do this, that we could choose to do our own individual podcasts, because we both have a lot to say on this. And this process that we're doing right now of like, okay, saying, okay, that's enough, and let's share. No, go ahead. I want to listen to you for now. It's really powerful for me to listen to Shane while he speaks his truth, and for him to listen to me as well. And that's part of the process that is feminine, the listening process, the receiving process. And that I just want to be clear that when we say feminine and masculine, it doesn't mean man and woman. It just means, just because a lot of people will think because we say feminine and masculine, it's just an energy. It's an energy, because there's lots of women on this planet that are creating from a masculine place. And they're creating from the same place internally, the same disconnect from, what we could call wholeness as the men. And but yet they're still represented. Maybe I believe that women are often closer to their intuition than men are. But I still see lots of women creating from a really masculine place. And that's what we need to address as well, is that, well, just having women present to give us feedback, some women play into and strengthen the whole masculine paradigm, because they're also cut from the same masculine cloth. And this is really about addressing and recognizing that energy of this veil of flawed. It's like a flawed system that we're all functioning under, and what's led us to this place of being able to subjugate these more feminine, softer parts of ourselves is, it's been like generations and generations and generations of disconnect from the earth and from connecting with our more feminine aspects of self that would allow us to be more receptive and to really hear like for other men, for example, really expressing their truth and their emotions and their wholeness in a way that might make us comfortable. If we had been in a place, in a society, in a culture, and in relationship to ourselves, in a place where we can recognize and feel comfortable with our feminine qualities, softer qualities, we would be able to be more receptive. So it's really just on so many levels of like socioeconomic, personal, relational, earth, global, that this shows up, these differentiation between the masculine and feminine energies. And it's ultimately about bringing them into balance, right?
Yes. Yeah. And you're getting it, you're nailing it with the listening aspect. If we can't listen, we're already closed off to any change happening.
Mm-hmm.
If we can't hold space to listen, to hear this new perspective. And what we want to call attention today is that the self-sabotage we're speaking about is the fact that we've stopped listening.
Mm-hmm.
And we've created the rule book where it's only a masculine opinion that matters, or that has any. We've created an overly logical framework of like, hey, if it's not a logical, masculine, thought out decision, then we don't want to even give it. We don't want to listen to it, and let alone listen to it. We don't want to integrate it or work with it. If we can't see how this is going to help move everything forward in this super fast sort of way, then we don't want to work with it. And I guess to speak about it out of the abstract and right into the practical, if we are in a place where there's only men talking and making the decisions, if you only get together with men to make business decisions, if only men get together to make government decisions, if we have the back of one of our dollar bills that shows the Declaration of Independence and it's 120 men standing in a room, where are the women? And we can see how we get way down these paths of where we no longer hear what the earth is saying to us either. We're starting to disconnect from many things that are speaking out to us, telling us what they need, and we can't hear them anymore because we're on a singular path of where we're going. And it's right. Through not including in the if feminine, masculine is too abstract, we could just say, here on the planet, men and women live. And to pretend like only men live here and only men's decisions matter is to disregard half of the planet. And
Right.
so here, here's two men talking about this, just to say that, like, hey, we get it, and there's a certain place of awakening and coming to an awareness of, like, hey, we're born into a certain program that's been ongoing for a long time, but we can also see as we start to wake up to say, like, hey, I don't think it's working this way. And it's not working internally for me, and it's not feeling good for me. And I'll admit out loud that, like, how I came to this was by listening to my girlfriend. She helped me to see how how I'm ignoring her, and it's not,
You're
and
out of the
getting out of
club,
balance
bro.
with myself. Exactly, exactly. It's earth shaking to bring
Yeah.
that wisdom back to the brotherhood. To say, like, hey, here's something I learned from my girlfriend today.
Oh, well, it must not matter
And
then. I'm not listening anymore. um,
exactly. There's many things we're not hearing. And the more that we learn how to trust the feminine wisdom, that it's not there to be selfish and dominate as much as maybe our masculine, thinking has, that this feminine wisdom is here to balance
right.
and to keep us in balance from getting out of balance with ourselves, and to realize that the more that we work with it, we're not always going to be able to bring it into a logical place of understanding, like, hey, I can see exactly why that's going to work and why. We have to learn how to trust that, like, it's coming in to bring the right balance to things. And if they're feeling it, then it matters. If they're speaking it, then it matters. And if we're going to create ignoring that, we're going to suffer later because of that. And we have to create with that. And then we'll know that we're creating on track, even if we don't understand how, as long as we're creating with their presence, with their health, with their happiness in mind, then we're moving in the right direction. Then we're creating healthy for our families. And it's probably going to be easier for other families to connect with our family if we have the healthy family happening already.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can
In
create healthy
balance.
communities and governments and earth structures through this network of family and relatingness. Whereas I feel we're living in a world very much of, like, fragmentation, and we're not very connected, even though we're getting closer and closer together in our growing population, and we're not relating very well to each other. And even in a relationship, how much work it is to relate to this person that you love, and you still have trouble communicating and relating with them and understanding why their needs or vision of the world is so different than yours. And yet, if we can't bring harmony with our closest relationships, how are we going to do it on the bigger scale of planetary? And yet, how can we expect the planetary molds to fall in line if we're not making decisions at the fundamental home base level of an inclusive model? Bringing our female partners into our integration of our discussions, of our decision-making processes. If we make too many business decisions without them, and we end up successful and rich and divorced, when we ask why, how did this happen? And yet we can look back and see that we were making decisions, as a friend just told me, unilaterally. I'm not
That's
even sure
it.
what that means, but it sounds right.
Well,
Like
one-sided.
without checking in.
Yeah.
And so then
Contralateral
saying,
is both sides. Unilateral is one, right?
okay, in the body matrix.
Yep.
Yeah. And that, if we were to overdevelop one side and strap the other to our body and never talk to it or listen to it, we could see how our own body structure would start to show a very out of balance, unhealthy process, and so we really need to be working with everything present, including the, starting to hear how femininity, a man and a woman, create every child. So within every human being is masculine and feminine energy, and to start to understand it that way, and to not be judging with our own heads what is through cultural acceptance of like, hey, this is too much of a girl if I act like this, or this is too much of, this is how a guy should act over here, and I should have less feelings than a girl has, or a guy shouldn't think or trust his intuition, or he definitely shouldn't trust his wife's intuition. These kind of things, like we've got these cultural misconceptions that are hurting us. And I would like to speak to the more inclusive version of whatever you're feeling is to, we need to access that and hold space for our own feelings to come through and process. We need to be listening to our own intuitions moving through. We need to be receptive of our partners, our female partners' intuition to their feeling when they're trying to get us to center up with their heart and feel their heart. And we're saying with our head that like, yeah, I understand it, I get it, but we're not feeling what they're feeling. We might be missing the very thing they're trying to help us understand. That they don't want us to mentally understand it. They want us to stop up here for a minute and just connect in with their heart and feel what they're feeling, so that we can tune in with what empathy is. And once we have our empathic connection happening, we don't need as many words or thoughts to understand what they're trying to say. We can feel what they're feeling, and we'll be more careful not to damage what they're feeling. And they may be feeling what the earth is feeling, or what the children are feeling, or what other things are happening that we're missing. And that's where the feminine wisdom is coming in to help keep us back in balance. They say, hey, you're doing something that's making the children not feel safe. You're doing something that's making me not feel safe. You're doing something that the plants and the animals are crying out about, and you're missing it. And then they're saying, hey, can you listen to us?
Yeah. Well, and I just want to jump in with that, because I really feel that feelings are the gateway for men to access this part of our own self without anyone else present. If I'm sitting and I'm feeling my life that I've created, that I'm living moment to moment, and I'm feeling it, and I feel sadness, or I feel conflicted, or I feel dissatisfied, or I feel depressed, or I don't feel uplifted and in sync with my life. What is that? Like, why is that? And that's like, well, that's our body, that's our feelings telling us that we're living in a unilateral way. And how can we get broader in our perspective? And often that's hard to do, to tune into your own feelings by yourself, or when you're with another man who's not tuned into his feelings. So that's part of why this work is so important, because we want to have large groups of men together making decisions from a balanced place. That's why we're doing this work. Men that are in touch with their feelings, if they're making decisions and they're in touch with their intuition and their feelings, and if they have partners, they're in touch with their partners and they're receptive and listening, a beautiful world can be created, even if it's just men. But the feelings, ultimately, that I really feel like that's something, emotions, that I've deepened a lot within my own experience. And I've seen how much it's changed my reality, how much it's changed my capacity to interpret the world in my life experience and my relationships with people. And the way I show up in each moment is like through emotions, and through really being able to feel in a more sensitive way what that is. Then we don't always need to look externally for guidance. Like, well, I'm always going to sort of, because we can give our power away too, to our wife or our girlfriend or our partner, because we can also look to them like, well, I don't know, I'm disconnected. What do you think? Okay, cool. I'm going to do that, And ultimately it comes down to just within ourselves. That's where it starts. And then if we have a partner who's also in touch with her intuition and really in connection, which is hard in this modern context that we live in, that if a woman, our partner, is also in touch with her feeling sense and her intuition, she has that level of trust, then we can also rely on her as part of our whole picture that we're getting about our life, rather than just the logical and the rational and the monetary and the quantitative. And we can really feel a more three-dimensional, way to interpret our life and to make decisions from. And ultimately, I just really, because I love all that you're bringing in. I think there's so much truth in it. And I also think that even if we're by ourselves and there's no one else around, it's about being able to tune into our own emotions and our own feeling about things, and not rely on anybody else to get us in touch with the earth. But we want to be able to support each other. But ultimately, this is about the work of the individual first. And then we get together, and you and I, as sensitive men that are somewhat outside of the paradigm of established masculinity, and we can connect and reinforce how we are. Like your being, Shane, you reinforce how I am as a man. That's part of why we're here doing this, because I'm like, yes, okay, he feels how I feel, not just think. He also thinks how I think, but he also feels how I feel. We can work from this place, and we reinforce each other and strengthen that capacity to be in touch with the emotions and our feeling sense. And we can move forward in a balanced way, not just a unilateral way. We don't reinforce that unilateralness between our back and forth between each other, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like that's the key to how to avoid self-sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
is to open up to that receiving aspect of like, hey, we're gonna be looking for the feedback constantly, like especially when we act out, like look for the feedback from that acting out, like what's happening, where's the biofeedback of us acting
Mm-hmm.
out. And sometimes we started this podcast saying, hey, we're talking about masculine principle and feminine principle, and we realized that everyone in our audience isn't going to grasp what we mean by that. And it may take us even a few podcasts to keep speaking to this and keep putting words to it. What is this masculine principle and feminine principle? But I could say in one realm of speaking, masculine might be like giving out, and feminine would be receiving in.
Mm-hmm.
And so like we act out as a masculine type of action, and then like to receive, to like see how that affected the environment, is the receiving aspect would be the feminine aspect. Or I could say something to Trevor, then if I'm also receiving, to like how that affected him. And
Mm-hmm.
then not just noticing it, but maybe adjusting by how that affected him.
Right,
And
like responding to the feedback, right?
yeah, responding to that feedback. And I feel as men in relationships, sometimes we're really good at the like, we're we're passionate for our women. We want to give them things. We want to pour our affections on them. We love them. We're like, maybe we become romantic or whatever. We pursue them, or we want to show them how much by all these actions. And yet then when the women open their hearts to us, we have trouble receiving that. Like it's so easy to like show our love and to demonstrate it and to like prove to the world how much we love that woman. But when she opens her heart more than we've opened ours, can we like receive the love coming back from that? That's where I feel like men, we often are challenged at that place. And maybe it's not our easiest strength. Maybe it's tuning into a more feminine energy to like open up and receive the love coming back to us. Can we sit and hold the love that's being shown to us?
Yeah,
And
that's
I
challenging
feel like,
as men.
yeah, this too is our aspect of self-sabotage, where we're out pursuing things, but we're not able to receive even the blessings of the things we're pursuing, or we're not able to feel the love or even the power we already have. Sometimes we're going out for more power or more love, but we're not
Mm-hmm.
receiving or feeling the power and love that we already have.
I love
And
that.
therefore, we're kind of like a hungry ghost out there trying to hunt and eat everything and never feeling good about any of it. And yet, because we don't know how to receive and feel what's already present. And I feel the self-sabotage is avoided with that biofeedback loop of the receiving, because before we can get too far out of balance, we're being told, we're getting signs. Things are telling us like, hey, we need to slow down here, we need to widen out here, we need to like ground out there. And to pay attention to that is to avoid the self-sabotage. And it can stop something from abuse from happening. We may be able to get enough biofeedback to say like, oh, someone's telling me that what I'm doing is making them uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And before I can like continue it to the point of abuse, I can check myself and back up a little bit and be like, oh, I'm sorry, like I didn't mean to do that.
I
I
didn't
didn't
mean to
realize
overstep my boundaries. Right.
yeah, I didn't realize I was scaring you. I didn't realize I was I didn't realize I was being threatening. I didn't realize I was hurting you. I'm sorry. And we can back up. And this opens up another huge topic that may become a podcast in itself, but it's the responsibility of masculine energy to check itself
Mm-hmm.
when it does get out of balance. Like the feminine energy will speak its wisdom to us so that we can, if we're listening, we can check ourselves. But it's really ultimately going to be up to us when masculine energy is kind of spiraling to the point of violence or abuse, threats. For healthy masculine energy needs to step forward and like hold safe space and call big brother back down a little bit to where he can feel good, and ultimately hopefully help him out as well. Like speak to him, speak to what it is that he's feeling scared or threatened or whatever by, and help
Mm-hmm.
him to feel supported and connected back to all of his brothers and sisters and feel safe again, to where that doesn't need to be getting out of hand that way. And
Mm-hmm.
to where we can step forward and be known as men, as people who hear. We can
Right.
hear what people see. We can hear what women are saying. We can hear what children are saying, and we can respond to it and help provide the structure, the masculine structure, the masculine stability, the masculine safe space that we're responsible for maintaining as men on this planet, instead of being always the sword that's threatening the violence. But we also know how to be the masculine energy that is helping to maintain the stability and the peaceful presence, so that good creation can be built upon it.
Yeah, and that's our responsibility, to keep ourselves in check, right?
That's what Trevor and I believe, and that's what we're here about as what we call conscious men's collective. They're like conscious of everyone in our surroundings.
Yeah, and I
cut you off there.
no, it's okay. Well, within this concept of keeping ourselves in check, I feel like this concept of that it's our kuleana, that's our responsibility to keep ourselves in check, keep our masculine energy in check, based on our biofeedback and the feedback that we get from our intuition. You said the big brother called big brother back, and big brother is like just to build on that concept, the big brother, the way you're talking about it, is like that charging forward, catabolic, consuming, accomplishing, more masculine, more straightforward and linear and direct energy that can be a little bit unsensitive at times, right? And that's in all of us. And recognizing that energy, and that's like what you're calling as the big brother energy. And the way you're saying it is like we're, as the little brother, like the more sensitive, the more tuned in, the more feminine, the more emotional, sort of going, hey, look at what you're doing and look at what you're creating, and this is going to hurt you too once you tune back into it at some point, and it's going to hurt a lot more. It's going to do a lot of damage along the way. So just call yourself back in, and you can still create and still have everything you want, but take these things into consideration and do it with this level of sensitivity. And the way I'm speaking about this is it's an internal conversation with self, with the different parts of self. And this is basically, I feel like this is the keeping self in check process that you're talking about, is this internal conversation moment to moment, and being able to have this with self. And I feel that this concept of self checking is one of the main cornerstones of Conscious Men's Collective. I feel like this is one of the cornerstone pieces of like, this is something that everyone needs to recognize, that we need to keep ourselves in check, as the masculine energy needs to be kept in check. Men need to be kept in check. We need to keep ourselves in check, because we can't rely on anyone else to do it in an authentic way. And then we also need to represent that out in the world and keep the world in check around us in a good, balanced, non-blaming, non-shaming kind of way, and reflect that to each other. And I believe that that's what you and I do for each other. And I believe that that's why that's one of the cornerstones of what we're talking about, because it's about integrating this feminine essence or this feminine principle into our internal process, integrating it into how we think and how we feel and how we rationalize, but we're getting some of that feminine feedback, and then we can be more sensitive. We can keep ourselves in check and go, okay, I'm feeling like I might be stepping over what's actually really in balance in what I'm creating right now. And cultivating this internal process is, I think, something that's just lacking in masculine, in men's circles, in men's relationships in society. I think men don't often recognize that this process can happen and the need for it. So it's really great to be talking about it right now and just kind of fleshing out the concept a bit, because it does ultimately, if you're not kept in check, what does it result in? Self-sabotage. To go full circle with it.
Yeah, we end up isolating ourselves, is ultimately, and then we're separate from everything that we were starting out to create with. And yeah, a couple of things you said there that I wanted to speak to, but basically that, yeah, we could all potentially channel any one of these energies, you know, these out of balance masculinity. Like you or I can channel these things. Like I have channeled them. I have embodied and become them. And it's, and the awareness that we're speaking of, I don't feel is out of reach for any man on the planet. I'm not saying like, oh, only certain men can do this. Like the reason I'm engaging in this podcast is because I 100% believe that it's within grasp for every man on the planet. Like we already come hardwired with this ability. We are more taught it culturally to disconnect from it and to not access our full human beingness. And I wish to kind of in a really polite and respectful way call men out and say, hey, like you can do this. It's not too big of a challenge. Like, and we're here as men to help support you in this. Like, listen to what your women are telling you. The women in your life are already speaking these things to you. Learn how to hear them, learn how to receive them, learn how to be changed by it. Like you can do this. They can help you bring this greater awareness in. Trevor and I are starting a movement to where, hey, men, we want to start a movement of men supporting men to bring and integrate these changes, to learn how to feel more connected with our partners, more connected with other men, and how the planet would look very different as we start to become more operating from a platform of acknowledging each other and working with each other and not trying to move so quickly ahead of each other that it's to the detriment of people around us.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that back into what we're doing and just the whole vision for Conscious Men's Collective, because that is what we're doing and it is totally within reach for everyone. We've just had the good fortune of having women that can put things in a way that we can receive and work with. And because that's been it's one of the things that we have in common, in addition to starting our own men's circles on different islands here. I've also, most of my growth I can attribute to my intimate relationship with my wife. And without that committed love connection in that container of our relationship, I wouldn't have been allowed myself to be pushed into a place where I was finally in receptivity. So I've worked through a lot of these layers within my relationship to get to a place of being able to see how valuable this is. And I think what we're doing is we're almost like shortcutting the process because we're framing it up and saying, look, these things, this intuitive connection, emotions, communication, sensitivity brings a wholeness. And here's how you can do it. And here's why you do it. And here's why it's worth it. And we can support you as brothers in this non-shaming, non-judgmental space to have these conversations, start developing your lens. You don't even have to be in a relationship. You don't have to rely on your partner for it. We can do this for each other and for ourselves, and creating this global network of men that understand this concept. And this is like, we don't even need to talk about it anymore because we've established the conversation so steady that we can all really operate from that. And what does the world look like then when there's a bunch of men with this type of lens that has been cultivated over time going out and creating in the world? The world's a much healthier place.
Yes. Yeah. And another motivation for starting down this path for myself has been a way to not leave all the work to the women in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Not to like make it the responsibility of our women to heal us as men when we're not taking the effort or placing to do it ourselves or to help each other with it. Like there's a way where uh, collectively on the planet there's a lot of abuse from of men to women, and it has been for many hundreds and thousands of years as we know it in our history books. And it's with that domination we cannot also ask them to heal us while we're oppressing them and while we're ignoring them and while we're not hearing them, and then ask them to help us heal these aspects of ourselves as well. So like the more we can do to like take responsibility for our own healing, our own growth, and how we can reach out and make this, instead of teasing other men for working with their heart, teasing other men for listening to their partner, their female partners, like to be, instead of doing that, we can be more supportive of like, oh, what did your girlfriend tell you? What did your wife tell you? What did your partner tell you? Like that wisdom's probably going to help me.
Right. How did
Like
that feel?
yeah, like what was she talking about? What did she say? Interesting. That's probably something that's needed on the whole planet and every man right now. So let's all pay attention to it, and like
Mm-hmm.
let's be collectively receptive to the information coming in from our partners. Let us be supportive of each other in whatever process that's going to involve in us growing and changing. Let us be supportive of each other as brothers when we're going to move into that brave space of emotional articulation, of speaking our heart's truth, which is not easy and can be scary. And we don't have a lot of encouragement and training there. So if a man is about to do that, by all means, let's support it. Let's
Right.
not make fun of, tease him, and make him add more pressure to it. Let's take a collective breath and like listen to each other and listen to the growth and see how we can be encouraged and supported by the growth of other men as we, here's a very masculine quality, brave into new territories.
Mm-hmm.
There's new territories of the heart, there's new territories of awareness that we are being called to step forward into, and not to keep hiding or keep thinking that it's leaving it up the responsibility of just singularly our partners to heal this for us, to nurture us as our mothers may have done when we were younger.
Mm-hmm.
Like our women will continue to nurture us and they'll continue to help us, but we can also keep stepping forward ourselves as men to take this journey on, to support each other in doing it, to raise our awareness about it.
Yeah. And I think, thank you. And I think that this step out of, or this first step of recognizing self-sabotage, of recognizing that it's happening and that we're all sitting in it and not realizing it, first recognizing it, then applying all that you just said becomes essential for us to then move out of that self-sabotaging cycle. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be continuing to create this container to explore this stuff with you, Shane. And really grateful to have another man to reflect with this. I've been told many times, and my wife has been called by men as she's been called controlling, and I've been told that my wife is controlling. And that's hard for me because it feels very emasculating, number one. And it's hard for her because then she's perceived as controlling. But the truth is that I believe that she's a strong woman, and I allow myself to be influenced by her because I can accept that I don't see all things at all times, and that I don't know the best in all situations, and that I'm not completely connected to all things at all times. And that's a tough one because I think there's a limited range of awareness in our culture for that. There's not much context for men to be receiving guidance from their partner. and or from their own intuition or from their own non-logical space. So it ultimately gets cast into this like, oh, well, he's not a man, he's a sissy, or he's whipped by his woman, or he's being controlled. And it's not one or the other. It's either he's in control or he's not in control. That's a really immature way of working with this. And this integration of being supported and being witnessed by other men, and working together to make this more whole expression of ourselves, it takes courage, it takes boldness, it takes self-trust, and it takes recruiting other men into our lives that can reflect this same way of being to us.
Yeah, I would like to speak to the word consciousness, as I understand it, is another way of speaking to what people call God or source energy, and to just say that like consciousness is us being alive right now. And here we are as men and women, we're two different aspects of consciousness, but I don't think there's any room for or proof to say that one is above the other, to whereas collectively we embody consciousness as men and as women, and the full spectrum has masculinity and femininity within it. And to create balancedly, we must merge these two together. And our challenge here on the planet is to be embodied as a man or as a woman, and to learn how to co-create together.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's no longer a matter of like who is in control, who
Mm-hmm.
needs to be in control. The more the question is who's working with other people,
mm-hmm.
and who is disregarding other people. And I want to call out more the fear that is underneath the teasing of and the name calling. And I want to ask like I would like men to speak their truth of what they are afraid of there. And I also like to call out it, maybe as we are wrapping this podcast up, one last point that I feel is really important and a hot topic amongst men is I want to identify one of the ways that we separate ourselves, because we kind of started this podcast with speaking about fragmenting and separating ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and how that works to our detriment. And when we speak condescendingly to women, we start to separate ourselves from them. When we name call, when we get in a locker room and speak one way about women in a different way to their face, or when we're to their face condescend them and abuse them, we separate ourselves from them, and we try to place ourselves above them. But I guess I would like to speak to why. Why would that be unnecessary to feel above them, or to push them down, or to disgrace them or disregard them, when they are, in any way you look at it, a part of your life. You were born of a woman. You partner with a woman. You live on a planet half with women. And so like to separate yourself with words, to speak condescendingly, to have one tone of voice about a woman here and another one over here, is to create fragmentation in your own life, and to create separation in your own life. And I would encourage men, as I've begun to in the last couple of years of my life, as I stand more in my own truth, to be mindful of that. So like, don't speak to me one way about women that you would be embarrassed to if they were standing here.
Mm-hmm.
And please don't speak rudely or condescendingly to them like they're lesser than individuals to their face. It's like, I guess I'm calling out there, like, with our words, we're going to create the reality we want to be in. And here on this podcast, Trevor and I are speaking out loud to each other, but broadcasting it to the world, and saying, like, hey, this is the world we want to create. This is the world we believe in, the world we want to live in. And we're using our words to help create that, and to help call out why. I would like to hear why it would be necessary to crush a woman's spirit, to make her feel lesser than or lower than. What is the purpose behind that? Where do you think it will lead you?
I want to speak to that for a second, because it's just so clear to me, and I appreciate all of what you said, because I'm ready to stop self-sabotaging. And I know that ultimately I'm still a young man. We're still young men, and we're still just we're still just tiptoeing into this territory. Where's this concept going to be in 20 years? You know, like this self-sabotage, that's the ultimate self-sabotage. Sabotaging our relationship by being condescending or controlling or disregarding of her value and treating her in that way, you're separating yourself from the other that you really rely on for your wholeness, your other half, as they say it. And, you know, and it's common, like, oh, my other half. And why would you subjugate that half? Because you're self-sabotaging your own support, your own sensitivity, your own enjoyment, your own like safety that you get from partnership. Isn't that's ultimately like, God, that's what we want. It's what we do partnership for. But then we're busy, like, you know, stabbing ourselves in the foot essentially. And I think that all comes back to us being disconnected from our own feminine essence, our own feminine principle, our own receptivity, our own sensitivity, our intuition, our emotions. And as men, our woman often represents that. So it becomes easier to disregard the things that she says, or her presence in general, or her value, or her level of control, or her standard in the household. And in order for us to relate in a more balanced way to the woman, we need to recognize that it is self-sabotage to carry out those same habits and behaviors. And in order to change it, we need to integrate our own wholeness so that we can relate in a more balanced way to our partner. And they really fit together.
Yes, I agree 100%. So we cannot expect to have a beautiful home or structure if we're constantly destroying the foundation of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot hope to have beautiful dreams if we are tearing at the foundation of the relationship that we're trying to build those dreams with. And we cannot build a beautiful planet if we're constantly trying to subjugate and keep in a slave type mentality half of our population. And it is the creative principle of us coming together, and every human is birthed from a woman, and so we have no room to set ourselves above. There's only room to work together and to keep kind of this holistic view. We are not just completely connected with women and on the planet, but we're connected with many things beyond. And I think this is the spiritual evolution that I speak about as well in our podcast before, in our time on Facebook. If people have seen that live feed there, we said Revving the Evolution was the title, but it's a way of awakening to our interconnectedness with all things, and working from that place of realizing our life connection to things, and to realize how we're destroying the very life that we're connected to, and how we can start to alter that at the very home base level, which I feel is in your closest relationships. It's starting with our hearts. Like, we take good care of our hearts, we honor each other's hearts. Like, Trevor's my friend, I need to honor his heart. Like, how do I do that? Like, Trevor will tell me how to do that. Like, I'm not going to know how to do that. Like, Trevor's going to speak it to me, I have to receive it. Like, my partner Drea, I need to honor her heart. How do I do that? Like, not from past experience of another woman, but she's going to tell me what she needs for her heart, and I need to learn how to hear that and receive that if I'm going to build something healthy for she and I. If it's going to build something healthy for our friends and our community around us. So, like, it's being this receiving, feeling our connection. Then we're not feeling so alone, so fragmented, so disconnected, so like in the competition, and we don't know who's winning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can look to how we can take care of each other, and then we're all winning by remembering ourselves and our connection to each other. And that is a big reason why I'm doing this podcast, is to like help speak the words back to our connection, back to our strength, back to our collective, as is, you know, in our title here of how are we connected, how to speak to intimacy that's not the same thing as sexuality. This may be another podcast in itself.
I think we've already touched on many podcasts that we're going to need to, relatedness, relationships, sensuality, connectedness, intimacy. But I think we'll have to touch on the intimacy one later.
Yeah. And I guess just to maybe closing statement, say that like speaking respectfully of women and our partners is not just a feminist movement, but we could
Mm-hmm.
start to see it as a way of self-sabotage when we are disrespecting them. To think that we could put them down or destroy them or belittle them and not hurt ourselves, we're fooling ourselves. And like I would like to bring that back into perspective. Like, hey, this is a podcast for men. We're talking to men, and before it's going to help the feelings of your partner, it's going to help you to not disconnect yourself from women, to not speak down to women, because then it's easier for you to shut off aspects of yourself that you're not listening to or not feeling comfortable receiving from, and to like bring that full aspect of yourself back in. It's going to be easier to listen to your partner, to the women in your life, and to not shut them out for bringing in a different wisdom that you're not used to hearing, but become more inclusive of that and receiving of that.
Yeah, beautiful tie-in. And I think to take it another step from that view and really pull it into the self and pull it into the individual, that all of these things have immediate dramatic effects on our own life experience. We feel connected, we feel supported, we feel seen, we feel recognized and understood by ourselves and by our partner and by our friends. And as soon as we start really living these principles, they show up in just like real bountiful ways. Like suddenly it's just like, wow, my life is just so vibrant and alive and connected, which has happened. And that this has immediate effects in a non-logical way. But that's the way that we all want our lives to move, in this like feeling sense. And when it takes hold, it's like, wow, I just feel great about life. And that's not logical. It's just how I feel in this moment. And that's what we all want ultimately. And I think that's what this supports, this
Yes.
podcast.
When I tap into it, I feel like unlimited potential. I'm like, oh, wow, I can create with the feminine. Like I can receive from the feminine. I can connect with it. Like me and my brother Trevor can connect. Like we can create. Like it really becomes unlimited when when you start to feel the power and the potential.
Yeah, so much power there. 50% more, at least.
In our whole selves, working with our whole selves. And it really, the problems of the planet seem simpler of how to address them. It almost becomes obvious how they've gotten so far out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And it really brings it close to home on how we can't create with ingredients that we don't want to have the same results as. We need to be creating right now with what we want to see later. You know, we can't leave out half of that and expect it to come back in later. And if we're not creating with it right now,
someone else isn't going to do it for us.
Right.
We need to do it right now. That's why we're sitting here doing it. So thank you, Shane.
Thank you, Trevor. Yeah. Thank you, audience.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to start these conversations or to bring these things out, because as you may have noticed, it's not spoken of as often as it could be right now. And we hope to change that with these podcasts, making it easier to discuss.
Yeah.
Easier to, more common to hear it talked about. Yeah.
Yeah, one at a time. Yeah, well, thanks everyone for tuning in. It's a really lovely space to share with you, audience, and Shane with you. I'm here in Honolulu. It's a beautiful day. I'm really grateful for that. Just wanted to check out with a little bit of gratitude. That's one of the things I had in mind, of just, just being able to get deeper into this process technologically and get all those things sorted out, and all the doubt and not sure how this is going to work. And then just to be in this space, Shane, is just, I'm so grateful. Really grateful for this creation moving forward.
Me too. I'm here in Petrolia, California. Only my second time here. The community is welcoming me really sweetly. Thank you. It's a chilly afternoon. I'm adjusting. And yeah, more podcasts to come.
Yeah. Yeah, so tune to the next one as we come. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. This has been Trevor Spring and
Shane Alexander. Thank you.
Awesome Conscious Men's Collective. Thanks for tuning in. Aloha.
Aloha.